I have, yes.
And, sir, can you take a look at the first paragraph of the second page?
Can I first make sure this is the right directive?
Sure.
Okay.
Take a look at the first paragraph of the second page, please.
All right.
Okay, you see where Secretary Husted in that paragraph says, I have decided to level the playing field on voting days and hours during which absentee voting, during the absentee voting period, in order to ensure that the presidential election in Ohio will be uniform, accessible for all, fair, and secure.
Yeah, I see that.
The instructions then that Secretary Husted gives further down sets hours for the Board of Elections, correct?
Correct.
Does not include weekend hours, correct?
It's not addressed.
Do you see in those instructions anywhere where it says weekend hours?
I see nothing addressing the question of weekend hours. I see this directive as only addressing the issue of regular business hours, which I consider to be Monday through Friday. And I will tell you, I wasn't in favor even of this directive because I think it was even more limiting than what it should be. However, I felt I should follow it.
That's interesting. Let's talk about the board hours that the Montgomery County Board of Elections set. During the first week, Montgomery County was only going to be open until 4 p.m. Is that correct?
I don't have it
Which
in front of
document?
me.
You need
Exhibit 2.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me if you want to give it to me. It says 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's correct.
So Secretary Husted actually ordered you to be open longer than you were going to the first week.
His is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I assume what you're saying is that he's given an hour more than what we did. And you are correct. I wasn't personally in favor of the limitation of our hours. I wanted more hours during the week for us. I wanted more hours during the weekend for us. I compromised with the Republicans on our board to come up with what we came up with. I'm just giving you my personal opinion.
I
think it's
understand
too
that. And
restrictive.
I'm actually just asking questions that seem to be pretty straightforward, so if we can kind of keep to that.
Well, except for the part where you said it's interesting. That's not so straightforward.
Sir, the board was going to be open October 10th through the 12th, only until 4 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
And Secretary Husted ordered the board to stay open until 5 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
October 15th through 19th, the board was only going to be open until 4 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And Secretary Husted ordered them to stay open until 5, correct?
Correct.
On the 22nd through the 26th of October, the board was only going to stay open until 6 p.m., correct?
Which day are you saying?
October 22nd through 26th.
Correct.
And Secretary Husted ordered them to stay open until 7, correct?
Correct. And without reiterating it, I would stand by what I said earlier.
You're on the record.
Yeah, thank you.
You understand that uniform means the same,
I do, yes. I'm all too aware of what uniform means.
and that's what Secretary of State Husted said he was doing in Directive 2012-35, correct?
For the regular business hours, yes. It says regular business hours.
Boards of elections can only accept absentee voting in person during their business hours, correct?
We can only accept absentee voting in person when we're open to receive those ballots, correct?
And Secretary Husted did not set weekend hours in 2012-35, did he?
He didn't address the issue. in 2012-35.
Is there anything in the hours to be opened that says Saturday?
No,
Is
that's
there
why
anything, is there anything in the hours to be open?
May I
One at a
finish my answer,
time,
please?
You did.
I did not.
I asked you a yes or no
May I
question.
finish my answer, please?
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Mr. Lieberman.
He did not address Saturday voting in this directive. Nowhere in this directive will you see any mention of weekend voting, whether it's Saturday or whether it's on Sunday. Since we had previously ordered it from our local board, and since we had a representative of the Secretary of State at that meeting, we knew you knew about it. So if the Secretary of State was going to tell us weekend voting was not permissible, he had the opportunity to do this in this directive, and he did not do it.
You never checked with the Secretary of State's office before the morning meeting on the 17th, asking if weekend voting was still allowed, did you?
I didn't have the directive until the morning of the meeting of the 17th. When I did what we normally do when we disagree, and that is that we have a motion, and if that motion doesn't pass, then it goes to the Secretary of State to break the tie after we advocate our positions. And
So
I
the answer
did
would
give
be
him
no.
the chance, I would have advocated my position to the Secretary of State, and I would have told him why I believe that this was not included in his directive and why it should be so necessary to do.
So the answer would be no. Is that right?
No, I don't think so. The answer is what I just gave you.
You did not correspond with the Secretary of State's office before the morning meeting on August 17th, did you?
That wasn't your question before the meeting. I didn't have the directive until the meeting, so I was not, I had nothing to correspond with him about.
So the answer would be no.
To that question, the answer is no, I did not.
Did you correspond with the Secretary of State's office after the morning meeting on August 17th to find out if weekend hours were allowed under the directive?
No, I didn't need to. In my opinion, the directive did not include the weekend hours. I filed my motion, which is a form of corresponding with the Secretary of State. When it's a 2-2 tie, we're supposed to have the opportunity to address our position with the Secretary of State. We never had that. Even when he broke the tie, I still, to this day, have not had the opportunity to express my position with the Secretary of State the way it's supposed to be done according to your rules.
And you received correspondence from Mr. Schroeder telling you that the Secretary of State's directive required the board to be open for the hours and only the hours in the directive, correct?
If you want me to be technical, no, I did not receive that correspondence. The correspondence was sent to the board. I did read that correspondence. I disagreed with Mr. Schroeder's interpretation of the directive, as I am entitled to do as a board member with a brain.
You do, as a board member, take an oath to follow the laws of the state of Ohio,
And
correct?
the United States Constitution
And part
and the
of that-
Ohio Constitution.
And
Yes.
part of that is to follow the directives issued by the Secretary of State, correct?
Correct, which I believe I did. And still, to this day, believe I followed that directive. Mr. Schroeder and I may disagree, but I believe I followed that directive, and I'm doing my job as a board member to express that.
The Secretary of State issued, let's call it Directive 2012-38, whereby he orders boards of elections to be closed every weekend from 35 days out until the weekend before Election Day. Would you have voted to follow that directive?
I'll object for the record. I think it's talking about a hypothetical. And it's,
I will answer if you want me to, but I
so you have to tell me.
appreciate the objection.
Your witness is very enthusiastic, I don't want to hold it back.
But
Your
I do
objection,
object. I think
Don,
it's
your
hypothetical.
objection is noted. he wishes to answer, so keep your objection in mind when considering the matter.
If you are asking me if the Secretary of State issued a directive that said that the Board of Elections shall be closed 35 days before the election, was that the question?
No, my question was, let's say the Secretary of State issues a directive that specifies during the early voting period, so 35 days out, boards of elections shall be closed on Saturday and Sunday. Every Saturday, every Sunday during that period of time.
Okay.
That's the only thing the directive said. Would you have voted for that directive?
My conscience would not have allowed me to vote for that directive. I would have voted against the directive. I would have expected the Secretary of State to listen to my arguments on my motion and on my conscience. And if he decided I was wrong and he broke the vote in favor of the Republicans, my choice would have been to either follow that directive or to resign.